The priority theme of this year's CSocD is pertinent to the current situation of our world. It is critical that nations and people work together towards a more inclusive and resilient recovery to end poverty and hunger. Before the pandemic, over 680 million people lived in extreme poverty, and over 1 billion people were unable to afford nutritious food. The pandemic not only demonstrated to us the extent of inequalities in our communities, but as a result of lockdowns and other health measures, livelihoods and employment were lost, and more people pushed into poverty. Sadly, women and children were the most affected. Present in over 43 countries, our IBVM CJ network witnessed this in their communities. For decades, they lived and worked in partnership with their communities, providing education and material support, allowing people to create sustainable livelihoods for themselves and their families. At the height of the pandemic, and with no social protection available for most, our network responded to these needs, finding ways to distribute food and medical support. While some families have recovered and restarted, the economic situation of others has worsened, making them more vulnerable to exploitation and trafficking. From years of working to eliminate human trafficking, our network is aware of the direct connection between poverty and people's vulnerability to trafficking. Today, we will hear directly from our members who share their work, their stories of resilience, and the good practices they have learned from experience. Our moderator today is Ria Bhargava, our current NGO youth representative intern. Ria is a past student of St. Agnes Loreto in Lucknow, India. First as a girl delegate and later as a youth representative, Ria has engaged with the NGO CSW, NGO CSocD, the Generation Equality Forums, and the high-level political forums over the past year, and has been a part of UN Women's Adolescent Girl Global and Asia-Pacific consultations. Ria will introduce our keynote speaker, Ambassador Michelle Verti, and our guest speaker, Sister Imelda Poole, IBVM, and Nabadita Shong. Thank you to you all for accepting our invitation. Over to you, Ria.
Thank you, Sister, for that enlightening introduction to today's webinar. Almost every country in the world is affected by trafficking, whether as a country of origin, transit, or destination for victims. In the 21st century, more than ever before, we must capitalize on our shared experiences to strengthen our goals, plans, and actions in this fight against human trafficking. To share their work and expertise with us, we have three such leaders joining us today. I welcome Dr. Michelle Verti, the Ambassador of the Sovereign Order of Malta to monitor and combat human trafficking, Sister Imelda Poole, the President of Religious in Europe, Networking Against Trafficking and Exploitation, and Ms. Nabanita Shome, the Program Lead for Protection and Prevention at the Kolkata Mary Ward Social Center, Loreto. We are also humbled to have a survivor of human trafficking speak with us and share with everyone present here today a short message about herself and her lived experiences as a victim of trafficking. Before we begin, remember to put your questions in the chat box, and we will make sure to request our speakers to address them. With that, I invite the ambassador today, who is joining us today to deliver the keynote address. Professor is also the president of the Foundation College University, Henri Dunant, Doctor of Laws of the University of Geneva, and the Professor of International Law at Webster University, Geneva. Between 2010 and 2019, he served as the Vice President of the International Institute of Humanitarian Law in San Remo, Italy. He has worked in the International Committee of the Red Cross between 1967 and 2000, first as the legal advisor, head of the Division of International Organizations, the Delegate General for Europe and North America, the Regional Delegate for Southern Africa and the Indian Ocean, and as the Assistant to the President. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, actually. I'm very happy, grateful, honored to speak and to be with you today. Indeed, poverty, hunger, and human trafficking, interventions and good practices from FBOs, trafficking in human beings is a ruthless, cynical form of exploitation. Traffickers prey on and profit from the adversities, distress, and vulnerabilities of other people. It is a serious crime that not only violates the dignity of the individual, but also infringes on a number of human rights. And poverty is a compelling factor in human trafficking. Poverty is a complex term that refers to numerous negative conditions, including a lack of food and productive resources, hunger and malnutrition, ill health, limited or no access to education and other basic services, increasing mortality and morbidity from illness, homelessness, and inadequate housing, unsafe environments, social discrimination and exclusion, and lack of participation in the decision-making process. Economic determinants such as poverty, unemployment, and lower income levels have been identified as the factors that most influence victims' vulnerability to trafficking in persons. The 2019 Global Multidimensional Poverty Index, MPI, from the UN Development Programme, UNDP, shows that in 101 countries studied, 31 low income, 68 middle income, and 2 high income, 1.3 billion people are multi-dimensional poor. That means that poverty is defined not simply by income, but by a number of indicators, including poor health, poor quality of work, and the threat of violence. Over half of the 1.3 billion people identified as poor, some 63 million, are children under the age of 18, and around a third, some 428 million, are under the age of 10. In speaking about different causes of human trafficking, Pope Francis calls our special attention to, and I quote, the first place of poverty, underdevelopment, and exclusion, especially when combined with a lack of access to education or scarce, even non-existent employment opportunities. The people experiencing poverty are especially vulnerable due to their circumstances and familial desperation. These high-risk populations become trapped in a desire to obtain a better life for themselves and their families. The Swedish Department for Global Development wrote in its 2003 report that, I quote, people become the victims of human traffickers mainly due to inequitable resource allocation and the absence of viable sources of income. These people, in the hope to gain a better life, may try to migrate to escape poverty. Traffickers exploit these vulnerabilities to lure their victims into exploitative conditions by offering false promises of employment and educational opportunities, remuneration in addition to a better life condition. The victims become then trapped in various forms of exploitative and abusive conditions, ranging from forced labor, sexual exploitation and prostitution, organ removal, or forcing them to commit crimes. Those suffering from poverty are purposely targeted by traffickers as a means of exploitation. Trafficking in human beings is to a large extent a symptom of relative and absolute poverty. People become the victims of human traffickers mainly due to inequitable resource allocation and the absence of viable resources of income. In many places, agriculture has become less viable, forcing people to move to the bigger cities and placing them at risk of being abused and work in slavery-like conditions. Today, human trafficking is regarded as a development issue as well as an expression of the absence of gender equality. The COVID-19 pandemic has worsened the conditions of numerous people, especially women, children, and migrants, exacerbating existing disadvantages, poverty, and vulnerabilities that are the root causes for human trafficking. Those already in precarious conditions have become even more precarious due to job loss and lockdown. The 2021 UNODC report, Impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on trafficking in persons, shows that the traffickers have adapted to the new normal of the pandemic lockdowns and started to operate even more underground and through technologies. Hence, they have started recruiting more victims locally and online, especially through false job offers online, targeting people made vulnerable by the pandemic due to unemployment, poverty, and hunger. Online child sexual exploitation has risen with the COVID-19 pandemic due to the greater presence online during the lockdown. Combating human trafficking is no simple task. Excuse me. A wide range of action is needed in several policy areas and sectors of society. The consequences for the victims are unacceptable, and they are usually deeply traumatized, both emotionally and physically. Unlike other forms of crime, trafficking typically involves repeated and prolonged trauma. Since October 2020, we have organized several webinars on human trafficking, and some have specially focused on the work of religions against human trafficking. And the webinars on these topics can be found on our website, www. And Loreto.org. The speakers of these webinars insisted on the need to work in collaboration in a network. The message of faith-based organizations is unique and essential. And so they are often the ones working at the front line nearest to the victims, as Luke de Pulford, an expert on the human trafficking present in one of our webinars, said, the message of religious life helps to close the gap between the front line and the support communities. So I think I'm happy if you can have a look indeed at those webinars. It's again on www.loreto.org, and you will find certainly interesting statements, interesting experiences, and also a will to work together, to partner, and hopefully to work to try to what shall I say, to suppress human trafficking. So we are trying our best. Definitely, we could also give you, and we will. Oh, thank you very much, Sarah Rudolph. That's very kind of you. Yep. Yeah, voilà. And alors, so I'm very happy. Of course, I would be ready to answer questions. I would be happy to see many questions, but for the time being, I think I'm very much open to answer questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that great presentation and for establishing the very essential link between poverty and human trafficking, between inequitable distribution of resources and forced labor, and how the derivatives of human trafficking can range anywhere between the phenomena of modern slavery to illegal organ trade. And to all our participants, make sure that you check out the resources and the previous webinars available in the links that have been posted in the chat. Once again, Ambassador, we are honored to have you here today. Up next, I welcome Sister Imelda Poole. Sister Imelda Poole, IBVM, a native of Great Britain, is a member of IBVM Loreto Sisters and the president of Religious in Europe Networking Against Trafficking and Exploitation, an NGO combating human trafficking in 31 European countries. After many years in education in the UK, the congregation was invited by the Archbishop of Durrës-Terrain, Albania, to work in the mission against human trafficking. She co-founded Mary Ward Loreto, an NGO addressing the root causes of trafficking, and was involved in the rescue and rehabilitation of victims of human trafficking. Sister Imelda was made a member of the Order of the British Empire in recognition of her service to end modern slavery in 2018. Sister, you have the floor now.
Thank you very much, Ria, and thank you, Ambassador Michelle. It's such a privilege to work with you on this platform and to listen again to your words of wisdom, and this time about what defines poverty. And I was most moved when you included the whole area of abuse and violation as part of the whole scenario or syndrome that pertains to the huge number of millions, even into the billion numbers of people who suffer from poverty today. This is an amazing webinar to have organized, and I thank IBVM CJ UN office, Cynthia for the invitation, and Janet for working together in the production of this webinar, and Ria for your moderation. Thank you. I would like to throw out a few statistics that I received last week through the OSCE and ILO about the horrendous, actually, reasons why we could define the causes of human trafficking. Do you know that 99.9% of human trafficking crimes are unsolved? Imagine. And 99% of perpetrators, and these are the poor, are not recognized. They're not even assessed or defined as trafficked, 99%. It's a crime, as Michelle said, out of sight, it's hidden. Only 1% of human trafficked people are identified, and only 0.99% of perpetrators are convicted or prosecuted. This is indeed a total violation of human rights. So what causes such a crime to be allowed to continue at such a high level of injustice in our world today? Pope Francis, with the UISG Conference of Religious in Rome, chose the theme of care for this year's Day of International Prayer Against Human Trafficking. And care, or the lack of empathy, leaves this crime unseen. It's a breakdown of our social systems, which are realized in order to care, but it's sadly, in many countries of the world, the social systems are not operating because of corruption and the lack of finance, which is the key, given to the social systems to be implemented and function in countries around the world. There is a turning of the eye against this care to demand cheap goods, cheap labor, cheap services, and easy access to sexual exploitation as a trade. We live in an unjust global economy where the rich have become richer. 8% of the world, 8%, even less we say, but 8% for sure, own nearly all the world's wealth, while the other 92 own the other half between them. We have a breakdown of the legal services, so very few victims gain legal aid or any kind of road to justice. And then, of course, we have the vulnerability into massive poverty through natural disasters and war. And in today's world, even in the present, what we call rich world, there is a housing crisis. So there is a growing gap between the rich and the poor. Thank you, Sarah. So here we have pictures of how it is. where the traffickers are being trafficked, where the traffickers are taking the trafficked to for cheap labor in the fields, in the factories, on the streets of Sohos all over the world, and on cyberspace. We learnt about children as young as 2 being sold online for rape experience for those who bought those children as they demanded, live streamed as it happened. And this is going on in our face today. It is a crisis that we have, a breakdown of the dignity and respect of the human being. We talk about social systems needing to care, but sadly, are we really caring for the person next door to us, our brother and our sister, as Pope Francis would say? We lack the care to love. In Albania, we're looking at interventions. We know that, as in many other countries where our sisters are working, we are looking at prevention against such a crime. And so human and economic empowerment is a massive focus for us in Albania, both with youth, women, girls, and men and boys. We look at gender equality for those who are on the margins and on the edge, looking for a way out, really, a way out of Albania to have a better life. So the idea is to empower people for work, which is one of the SDGs. If we have a right to work, we have a right to earn a living. And if there is not that opportunity, then of course, people want to get out of their situation, to go illegally abroad if they can, to go anywhere where there is more hope. So our programs are for mainly youth, boys and girls, towards economic employment, towards economic empowerment with toolkits, with job opportunities. And so far we have 60% success, but the finance is short and it's really difficult to continue these kind of schemes. Thank you, Sarah. So we are looking at the problem of a society built on fairness, or we might say unfairness. As we said, the 8th richest people on the planet have the $350 billion. This massive imbalance in the world leads to the most deepest ingrained poverty, which people find almost themselves being hopeless to find a way out. It needs a joined up approach. This is the implementing action that is called for us to join together, to realize that it's only together organizations all over the world looking for a more just and humane society, to see themselves in partnerships and to look at corporate and collaborative approaches to breaking down these crimes and these causes and the demand for the illegal, illicit and ill-gotten ways of working and getting goods and riches. Thank you. Pope Francis speaks of us not sharing one's wealth with the poor as an action of stealing, of taking from them, taking from their livelihood. That's a very, very strong statement. When we think about it, in what manner are we all engaged and implicit and complicit in the crime? It's not our own goods which we hold, but it's theirs, the poor, those who cannot access the goods like work, like homes, as Michelle talked so much about, all those areas that lead to poverty. Money must serve and not rule. So we're being invited to reset the moral compass, to look at our attitudes, our values and our ethics. We need to confront the demand for so much that is just a response to greed and having more than we need. Thank you. So we're looking for a society built according to the law of human rights, law which gives dignity to all, law which is victim protected, and also is trauma informed. This is our Renata policy. And very sadly, even laws such as in Australia, which is looking at the supply chain and ways of checking out and ensuring that supply chains are clean of human trafficking, we know now today from information just released that unfortunately not implemented. So we can have brilliant law, but the justice is in the implementation and the prosecution according to the law, and the journey towards prosecution being trauma informed and victim protected, which means we have to give time to victims and survivors to come through trauma. We have to walk with them slowly till we can hear their truth and hear the journey that they have experienced in abuse and exploitation, so that the criminal can be named and shamed and also supported in the rehabilitation from crime to new life and justice, for them to find in a life lived decently and according to human rights and dignity of everyone. As we know, a trafficker in Albania often says, well, everybody's doing it. So what is the way out? What is an implementation for us as Renata and as Mary Ward Loreto? Well, first it's training, and we can all get that. What is happening in cyberspace? So we work in collaboration with International Justice Mission to expose what this is about, so that we can work together with the EU, with the Council of Europe, with the civil society platform on which we all have a presence in Renata, to work with a common voice to fight this crime against cyber trafficking and to ensure that the law is on the side of the victim. Iniqui is English and has actual apps that we can use in schools, which have a complete toolkit for working against human trafficking and raising awareness. Thank you. So what has happened in COVID-19 to expose this crime and to even create an atmosphere in which the crime has multiplied immeasurably and almost in a sickening manner as the traffickers make the most of the situation? So we know that in the environment we're living, that many of the services that would have been available, and a lot aren't anyway, but those that were closed and are just beginning to open. So during these 2 years, there's been a huge increase in homelessness, and the drop-in services have closed. The closure of police, I experienced this myself trying to get support in England, but the front desks have closed, so it's very hard to get police protection, and especially if you're in crisis. NGOs and charities have been furloughed, the money has gone down, finances are not available. It's been incredibly difficult to implement the work against human trafficking during this time. And there's been a huge increase of unemployment, and poverty has escalated beyond recognition. And so transorganized crime has gone underground and online. So how did we intervene in Albania? We had an earthquake just before COVID hit the country in 2019. In March, it hit the country in 2000. In that year, we also had an earthquake, 14,000 homes destroyed, about 60 lives lost. It was a terrible, terrible time for us. So even though we were exposed to COVID, the staff of Mary Ward Loreto were out on the streets with the victims. The shelters were kept open. The protection continued. COVID, it was experienced by all our staff, but they continued with protection as best they could, because there was such a huge increase of poverty and desperate hunger, even to starvation. We heard even this week that a young woman died freezing in her house because they cut the electricity off. So we're all the time advocating for human rights and dignity for all in our country. It is very, very difficult because law is so weak and corruption is so high, but we do not stop fighting and working with these very, very sad situations. Thank you, Sarah. And so we come to the homeless situation, which is probably the most tragic in the light of poverty and the exposure to human trafficking. We know that, and I could spend hours talking about homelessness, but we do know from absolute evidence that many, many traffickers go to the homeless to woo and groom them for a better life. And it's these trafficked homeless people that are used in the markets, in the drug running, in the grooming for cheap labor, for many, many underground illicit criminal activities. So what do we do about this in our work? It's very difficult. We have the rescue and rehabilitation going on through all our centres, from domestic servitude, from sex work on the streets. The critical work in terms of homelessness is to have the finance to pay the rent for families that can't afford it. And that is a big, big movement that we move towards, to get funding to ensure that families are kept at home so they're not living on the streets and therefore exposed to the traffickers. It's a very delicate journey that we cover, but we have to do it. And also many of our migrants, that's internal migrants from the mountains to the towns for studies, often have not got enough money to live and end in a situation of homelessness, couch surfing. And these students are even encouraged, this is in England too, migrants are encouraged to go into sex into prostitution to get money to pay for their rent and food. And these youngsters are easily exposed to the traffickers who are in those worlds of sex labor. Thank you. This film is made by a young teenager who wanted to share her insights about human trafficking. And it's an intervention through film to give survivors their voice. And we did have a film festival in September 2021, where survivors were given the voice and the front line. I think if you move your cursor over the slide, Sarah, you will find the, yes, there it is.
Why would you think someone could be in a really awful way behind that door? And you don't want to think it because it's uncomfortable. They can only sell a gun once. You can sell a girl 100 times. Every visitor will take like a backpack with alarm. You have a pay-as-you-go mobile phone on you, and for example, you wear shoes and come running. It's not just that wall that's the barrier, it's like their languages and society, it's the shame, it's everything that's just makes them not feel they can walk out the door and say help. We questioned at the beginning, why aren't they shut down? Because you know that they're all here. I used to just wander out, say hey, go out on nights out, and you just kind of laugh at the sex shop and stuff. I think that's how it cleverly keeps its powers hidden in plain sight. So by shutting that down, actually, it just pushes it underground.
So finally, what we're calling for in terms of this growth in poverty leading to an explosion of human trafficking is a movement from sympathy to empathy. We're looking for a true conversion of heart, a heart that is warmed with love and is able to see beyond our small local circle to the needs of our brothers and sisters on the streets as we pass them by, in the shops, in the gullies between houses, in the farms that we see when we're journeying, to actually see the destruction of human beings in the marketplace of the world. And we pray that we will have a change of heart and it is a desire to love beyond the norm, to where it costs, to where empathy hurts with those who are hurting. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister, for sharing with us this thoughtful collection of your experiences in this field. And thank you for highlighting the importance of welfare in our modern day economies. I believe I speak for everyone among the panelists and in this webinar when I say that the most important question posed by Sister's presentation was whether or not modern societies are based on the principles of fairness or whether they are based on principles of injustice, whether our economies are based on the principles of care and mutual respect for human rights and human dignity, or on lack of sympathy or empathy, as Sister highlighted. Indeed, profit made on the expense of others or on the compromise of human dignity has no real value to it at all. Once again, thank you so much for this deeply impactful presentation. With that, I invite Ms. Nabinita Shomi, the Program Lead for Protection and Prevention at the Kolkata Mary Ward Social Center, Loreto. Ms. Shomi is currently heading the Anti-Human Trafficking Project at Diamond Harbour and at the Indo-Bangladesh border, Basirhat, along with the Empowerment Leadership Program for Basirhat and the Red Light Area Project with sex workers and their children at Sonagachi, West Bengal, India. Having completed her postgraduate diploma in NGO Management and Child Rights Law, Ms. Shomi has worked in the social sector since 2016, dedicating her work to the social development of the marginalized groups in the society. Ms. Shomi, you have the floor.
Good evening from Kolkata, India. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. It is a great pleasure to represent my organization, Kolkata Mary Ward Social Center, and our director, Sister Monica, who is not here right now, in such a big platform. Currently, KMWSC is implementing 13 projects in West Bengal and Nevada district, Bihar in India. We are working in 4 thematic areas, which is in college with the Sustainable Development Goals. The thematic areas are women protection and children development, education and health, community and skill development, disaster and pandemic management. Jumping directly into the topic of discussion, I would like to say that for us, the world stopped when the nationwide lockdown was announced on 24th March 2022. We at KMWSC could understand easily the threat was more for our beneficiaries in each of the 13 project areas because they belong to the economically backward section and they fall under the vulnerability section. It was more difficult in West Bengal because during May 2020, West Bengal was hit by Cyclone Amphan. So it was a dual calamity and it was dual difficulties for us because at that time, I still remember, we used to stay back in small groups in the office itself. We used to do the packings of the relief kit. It used to take us like late night, and then in the early morning, we used to leave for the Sundarbans. Because of the COVID-19, the difficulties were much more for us because we had to come back on the very same day. It used to take us like 12 a.m., 1 a.m. used to come back home. So the crisis was huge. I would like to focus that during the general chapter of Loreto Sisters held in 2014, mandate has come, and as GC called us to transform two lives more radically true to the gospel of Jesus in the service of the people of our time. Hence came WSC Never Look Back. It is quite normal that during the pandemic time, as the crisis has increased, the trafficking has also increased to a drastic level, because obviously the vulnerability of the people has increased. And from a personal experience, I will say that over the years, the approach we have taken in the field level, like awareness, advocacy, that norm has totally changed because of the connectivity issue. So what we did is we had to change our entire plan. So during the lockdown, when there were no movements happening in India, what we did is we went to the total online mode. As Sister said, as Sister Amelda said, that there were lots of trafficking happening through online mode because the traffickers has also changed their mode. So we also ourselves have changed our mode. What we did is during that time, we could understand the need of our presence in the field level during that time. So what we did is we conducted our meeting, awareness programs, wellness check, and also monitoring over video calls, phone calls. We created separate WhatsApp group for our beneficiaries, and we had started tracking them, and we started looking after their vulnerability level also. So during this time, we could understand that many of our beneficiaries were on the verge of starvation. They are depending solely on their life saving, and that is draining rapidly. So what we did is we identified that section of the beneficiaries and made a separate list for them. A separate crisis came up for us is the use of smartphones with the children or internet. So we could understand without proper guidance, the children are now using the mobile phones because the classes were being taken through online mode. Hence, there should be a proper guidance, and proper do's and don'ts should be told to them. So what we did is during this time, we change our approach totally. And what we did is we did the relief kit distribution in all of the field areas as per the need basis. The families who were at the highest level of potential vulnerable and are the potential of being trafficked, we started giving them relief kit that were dry ration, nutrition kit, health kit, and so on. Even when the unlocking started, we still have lots of government protocols. Hence, we started doing all of our field activities, but in smaller groups with maintaining social distancing. And also, we also started connecting the beneficiaries with the government schemes. During the COVID-19, there were lots of schemes which were put in with our government, Indian government. We started connecting our beneficiaries through that. What we did is we started identifying the new needs of the beneficiaries, which were changing rapidly at the field level. So at Diamond Harbour, we could understand there were a lot of migrant laborers who has come back, and they are out of work and they are at potential high risk. So we created 15, we have taken out at-risk, most at-risk 15 families from whom we started giving them livestock. We had given them 10 chicks, and they started the eggs, they started selling the eggs and so on. This was a successful format which was replicated in our Sundarban project area as well, with 45 self-help group members. And this is what we are moving forward with, this approach to give them an livelihood support. For the Bashirhat project in the India-Bangladesh border, we came across many of the beneficiaries. The India-Bangladesh border, over there is a transit point for trafficking. We are walking in Bashirhat. So we came across many beneficiaries who were the survivors. So what happened is during the survivors were there, they were more of the cases were under trial. They were getting threat messages, threat calls. They were finding it very difficult to sustain the economical cost of the cases which were under trial. Also, many of the beneficiaries who are or the survivors who were taking care of the families are out of work. So they were again being directly approached by the traffickers, now offering them money at front and asking them to come with them. So this should be a willing trafficking So we could understand the threat level over there. So in Basharhat, we created our own survivors group, and this project has helped them in providing them educational support, legal aid, counseling, and that is how we are moving forward in Basharhat. We also have a very strong, successful format which we are implementing in from 2015 from the Canning project. That is the child tracking system. Each of the child parliament members are tracking 8 to 10 other children without their knowledge outside the group in few of the issues like parameters of the questions which are set by KMWSC. And this tracking are done on a daily basis. So right now we are tracking 3,700 individuals throughout West Bengal. So any red flags are being identified, we are being informed by the community adolescent groups, that is the child parliament itself, and we are taking upon this case with the local law enforcement. And it was a successful initiative because from 2020 March, we have been able to intervene to 15 trafficking and potential trafficking cases. And also, as of now, we have intervened to approx 78 trafficking, child abuse, and potential trafficking cases in our project areas. So what we did is we have taken upon also the Community Vigilance Committee, the local stakeholders, and we have created awareness among them about COVID-19 precautions, about how to use a mobile phone with the kids, the lock systems, and what are the threats of trafficking. So this are being done, and this successful model have been taken upon by other projects of the organization. Also, I would like to focus that under this system, we have also successfully completed one international webinar and one international conference, and we have made many publications, especially the child tracking system, which you will get in our organization website. That is Kolkata Maryworth Social Center. I would like to screen share, and I would like to show you that how we are working over here. One second. Yes. Okay, slideshow. Okay, so this is during the lockdown. As you can see that we are doing the safety protocols are being maintained by the organization, as well as we are doing the relief kit distribution. Over here, you can see our staff. We are wearing PPE suit because we were at the red zone during the distribution. It was during the cyclone time, and we were divided in small groups I had discussed earlier. So this is of the migrant laborers and the trafficking projects, which we did the distribution by maintaining all the government protocols. This is KMWSC Care, where we provided cooked meal for entire month to the COVID patients and their families, also in the red light areas. And over here, when we started the project, we didn't had any funders. So our director, Sister Monica, said we have to do it. It was in the need. So what we did is all the staff got food from their homes, and we started the project from our end and then the pyramid thing happened, and we got lots of help from outside. So over here, you can see the cooking, the chopping. This is our Corona diaries, the number of distribution, the kgs of rice, how we are working. This is all of our teams are in the field. We are conducting the distribution. This is during the cyclone Amphan. You could see the condition. We are on the boat over there. And like when we were traveling in the boat, we got stuck in the river. So we had lots of experience and lots of stories to share. So this is how we worked during the COVID time. And this is cyclone Yash. There was another cyclone in May 2021. So West Bengal is going through a lot of disasters, which is also a key factor for trafficking. So over here, you could see that we are conducting the meetings in small groups and in all online formats, distribution. We are having therapeutical classes, and we are connecting with the beneficiaries. We are going to the extreme corners of the villages, and we are connecting with all of our beneficiaries. This is during the conference. So during the Corona time, what we came across is the awareness, advocacy, and the connection with the field. shouldn't be lost. Also, the networking with the government stakeholders, law enforcement, border security force is also a key factor. During the COVID, we have intervened to many rescue cases. We have gone to the rescue. It was lockdown. It was very difficult for us to go to the villages. It was around 2 a.m. when we reached there. It was all forest around us, and we were able to rescue the girl. So the condition of the girl was very bad. There were counseling. We had to hand over to the law enforcement, and she was rehabilitated. So this is how we have moved forward. And I strongly feel that during this time, we have ourselves being implementing the project in the field level, have found that the traffickers mode or module of trafficking has changed drastically, because they have changed their self as per the COVID new need. And I feel that for us also, we have to develop ourselves more, and should be should be upgrading ourselves, so that way we can also stop the traffickers and their new ways. So that is what we are focusing on, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Shome, for sharing your experiences with us. And thank you so much for highlighting the importance of grassroots action, especially during times of crisis like the COVID-19 pandemic or the Cyclone Yash that you mentioned during your presentation. And I believe our listeners have benefited greatly from having listened to the various models that the KMWSC employed during times of such crises. Once again, thank you so much for your presentation. Even as we listen to experts who are dedicating their life working to end human trafficking, it is of great importance to listen to and learn from survivors of this phenomena of trafficking itself, as the lived experiences of victims and survivors of trafficking can play a crucial role in establishing effective measures to prevent this crime, in identifying and rescuing victims and supporting them on their road to rehabilitation. One such survivor of human trafficking, rescued by the team of the Kolkata Mary Ward Social Centre, India, agreed to speak with us and has a message to share with all of you. This message highlights the role of survivors as key actors in combating human trafficking.
I was silent, but for me, it was not a choice. My mother is a sex worker, and I have seen her suffer my whole life. Due to COVID-19 lockdowns, I came back from hostel where my mother lived with her then boyfriend. When my mother was out with her clients, her boyfriend used to threaten me and force him on me. He used to tell if I don't run away with him, he will kill me. I was scared and silent. He forced to run away with him, and after reaching his home, his family forced me to marry him. Then he was planning to take me somewhere. I felt uneasy and scared, unsafe. As I was underage, my mother with KMWSC Kolkata Mary Ward Social Centre team filed child marriage case, and my mother knew he was a trafficker and who was her pimp, and he sells girls out of the state. The police with KMWSC team started searching for me. I called my mother when I got a chance to tell her I am scared and he is trying to take me away from the state. During first rescue attempt, he was tipped off. I was scared, but thanks to the local police and KMWSC team, I was rescued and saved from the hands of the trafficker. When I came back, I was happy to be saved, but I was scared of my life because he was threatening me. But the KMWSC team helped me gain confidence, and now I have rejoined my school. I want to be economically independent and support my family. I want my mother to be out of the trade. So I have joined the Skill Development Unit of Kolkata Marywood Social Center. I have joined the Fashion Designing, Tailoring and Beautician course. I am hopeful and happy now. I know I am lucky to be saved and to get the much needed help. I want to fight for the other girls who are still missing, and I want to be a police officer, join the law enforcement.
We thank the survivor and the Kolkata Mary Ward Social Center for this eye-opening message. It was a deeply impactful video which has certainly left our listeners with a lot to think about. It is finally time to open the floor up to questions from our listeners today. The first question is addressed to all the panelists. Climate change and environmental disasters are some of the most difficult problems of our times. What has been the experience of your organizations with climate change and environmental disasters? How is it changing the face of human trafficking and modern-day slavery? How must the policies of our governments reform to deal with this change? Any of the speakers are free to answer this question.
Shall I kick off and just say a little? I was asked to meet a young Indian man in the UK about 3 months ago. He had just come with his family to live in the south, and he was a philanthropist, you might say, but his heart had been turned as a man who needed nothing in India to see for himself in Nepal when they had I think they had an earthquake. Was that right, Ria? Nepal, I think they had an earthquake, yeah. And he actually saw traffickers taking children from that earthquake scene. And he decided, because he had money and influence, to follow the children. And he followed the train of the traffickers with thousands, it ended up with thousands of children, to Calcutta, where they were sold into the brothel situations on the streets. And it was the most horrendous experience of his life, which changed him forever. And he's now established a big school in, I think it's called Siliguri, on the borders up there. And he showed me pictures of this school where it's now started with 500 of these children with the consent of their parents. So it's just to say that one man made a difference in India with his own kind of wealth, and it's not all bad news. But I might say that in Albania, we had the traffickers go in a similar situation with earthquake, but there wasn't that immediate wealth to back up the crisis.
I'll just add to that, like for us over here, that we work in Sundarban area, so that is an area which falls under the natural calamities a lot. So what we are doing is we are working with the like untouchable communities over there, like the Lodha communities, and also in Sundarban we have the solar projects. So over there are multiple people over there who do not have the proper documentation or legal aspects. So even if we, even if the government have so what's happening during the national calamities, what we see is every year a certain amount of people travels to the cities. And even what happens when they're traveling, there is no migrant registers are maintained properly. So hence the tracking of the laborers who are going out of the area are not properly monitored. So that is the crisis. That is a solution. If we maintain a migrant register, that's a solution. We can track where the person is going, who is the person is meeting with, and some contact numbers or details. And along with that also, what happens is there's an alternative source of income. If they could have an alternative source of income in the villages itself, after the natural calamities, they will not have the tendency to migrate and fall in the traps for the traffickers. So that also an approach we usually deal with.
I think also, Ria, if I might add, that there are a lot of ecology projects starting in Europe with their people who are living on the margins, through an understanding that even in poverty there is a need to change lives, to make lives better. So as I can see it, say Mary Ward Loreto has set up environmental programs in the schools, even in the villages where there is very little, but they're looking at making life better and the environment better and cleaner for themselves. Really, it's for themselves. And like testing pollution, the water's polluted in many areas where we are, and this is creating a lot of illness. So it's like broad-based organizing. You know, we work at that so that the local community can see the greatest needs. And it's not so much in terms of a big national disaster, but it's an ongoing national disaster because the water is polluted, or the forests that are being cut down, and so the climate change is happening in front of us, and it's just greed instead of care of the local people in those very poor regions anyway. So it's a very it's a conflict resolution sort of situation that we're in.
Thank you so much, Sister Imelda and Ms. Shomi, for highlighting these facts. And I believe everyone in the audience would agree with you when you speak about how transformative grassroots level environmental programs or education can be when it comes to climate change and helping keep the poorest of the poor out of the reach of traffickers. And thank you, Ms. Shomi, for bringing this really unique point to light about how deeply the labor migration crisis in India specifically is tied with human trafficking. With this, I would hand it over to Zinzi, another one of our interns, to ask the rest of the questions.
Oh, hello everyone. My name is Zinzi. I am one of the interns, and I'll be reading some of the questions from our attendees, and also some from our hosts here. Yeah. So our first question is from one of our attendees, Paulus Ramat, and it is directed at Mr. Ambassador. So it reads, forced labor and human trafficking are horrific crimes, netting at about $150 billion annually in illicit profits, which according to the International Labour Organization victimizes an estimated 40.3 million people, including 24.9 million in forced labor and 15.4 million in forced marriage. 1 in 4 victims of modern slavery are children. Mr. Ambassador, what actions would you suggest to bankrupt the businesses of human trafficking in order to reduce the victims of human trafficking and take out the profits from those who benefit from those dirty businesses? No worries, we can circle back to that question. It's absolutely fine. So our second question is directed at Sister Imelda. How can our communities be proactive in implementing care to those affected by human trafficking?
That is a huge question, but it's not one that I would be scared to answer, if you like. First of all, I think it's truly important that, and then I don't say this without thought, but I think it's very important for people to spend time in reflection and meditation about this, because I think to move from sympathy to empathy, the heart has to have a massive change for all of us. I'm not saying pointing the finger at out there, but me too. for us to be truly awake and to see where it's going on and to respond. It could be that there's somebody sitting on a street. Are we prepared to sit down with that person? So it's like to really prepare your heart for action that might arise on a tube or in a bus or on a street. I think the major thing too is education. I think we have to invest our time and commit ourselves to understanding this terrible phenomena in our world today. There are in England, there are 800 agents or NGOs working against human trafficking. And around the world, there are, I mean, in Albania, we have about 40. So everywhere you go, there will be NGOs and you can volunteer. And there you learn about the crime, and you can also learn through meeting survivors and victims, the situations. As far as we go in Albania, every single trafficked victim has come from a dysfunctional family through abuse, violence, corruption within the country, but also dysfunctional coming from poverty, dysfunctionality. So that is another thing. You can advocate. If you feel that grassroots work is not your call, you can advocate, you can educate yourself and work to present in schools, to raise awareness in schools, to raise awareness in your parishes, to really speak out against this crime, to open your heart to that, to speak with love and affection towards your brothers and sisters who are suffering in the cold face. You can also write letters to your MPs, ask them about laws in the country. Are they on the side of the trafficker? There's many things that you can do, you know. You can even go and visit your local MP or whoever is your representative in the countries across the world to speak out against human trafficking. Those are just a few ideas, Zinzi.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that response. I think we're going to circle back to the previous question, just so that, and this question was specifically directed towards Mr. Ambassador, but actually all speakers are 100% free to answer this question. So it was from Paulus Ramat. Sorry, I'm going to have to scroll down a bit. I'm just going to go directly to the question instead of the background information. What actions would you suggest to bankrupt the businesses of human trafficking in order to reduce the victims of human trafficking? From those who, and take out the profits from those who directly benefit from those businesses.
Is Michelle going to answer first, please?
We have all those past webinars, and some were recorded in French, some were recorded in English, and we think that actually we could make them available in 7 languages, so that people will not lose the great benefit of those webinars. And so that's why in a nutshell, I think it's good that everyone could access the past webinars and say, okay, from October 2020 until October 2021, we have all those webinars, And here they are. Not only they are very clearly but there are also, I think, something which could be very helpful because obviously when the government is asking a government to make those videos available, to make those videos available in, again, French, English, Spanish, and Russian, Spanish, and so on. So I think no, I think it's something we should see how much indeed participants are committed in getting access to those past videos and then to past videos and subtitles. You see, so for me, it's very good because I think we. Yeah, no, good.
Shall I add to that, Michelle, Ambassador? Yes. I've just been reading a couple of statements in the chat.
Yep. And
they linked with the government's responsibility and business. Yep. And I thank those people who wrote about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a response to the question too, Zinzi, because in Renata and in an organization we have in the UK, the importance is to bring the corporates to the front line.
Mm-hmm.
And governments are making some laws to ensure that supply chains are accountable for their trafficking, what they call trademark or what is going on in those supply chains. But sadly, it's not being implemented, as I said earlier. But if we ourselves in advocacy keep those corporates and businesses into the front line by confronting them with being responsible for their supply chains. There is an organization which I'd love you all to go to the website of called Ethisphere, and this organization is purely to bring corporates to account for their ethics.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those criteria is about their supply chains and the manner in which they're tracking their footmark in human trafficking, confrontation and combating the field in the supply chains.
Mm-hmm.
So Ethisphere, and there are 100 now businesses that have been allowed to come under the umbrella of Ethisphere because they have actually passed all the tests. But every year they are checked. Their supply chains are checked, their whole hallmark for ethical behavior is checked. And I think we need to be part of those kind of networks to keep the whole the way forward, because that's the manner in which life will change for traffic victims if there is somebody checking what's going on at grassroots. Also, the government needs to give all the assets that are taken in from prosecuted traffickers back into the compensation line for traffic victims, and that's not happening. So governments can be even getting rich on the back of traffickers from their assets, and they're not putting them back into the real needs of the trafficked.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that.
Does Nabanita, as she like to say?
Yes, just to add on to that is as we all know that trafficking is the second largest organized crime, and when we are working in the grassroots level, what we come across is very difficult to identify the chain of flow of the traffickers. If we even like if there is some arrest or we get hold of any traffickers, there is a certain change. It is very difficult to identify the main person at the end. So first and foremost thing is connecting with the government department and law enforcement. It's not one individual aspect. We cannot just depend on the law enforcement. There should be an entire circle. So what we have over here in certain states, we have a certain area where it is very difficult for the survivors also even to continue with the cases. So there are some loopholes in the government system which cater to the like for us in India, we have to book a case in certain IPC sections. So when a first like FIR is being booked or a statement of a survivors are being taken, it is very important that it is being booked under a proper IPC or certain section. But we see sometimes what happens is the person who is writing the statement from the government and itself tries to make give it a very small or give try to cover up the story in a very small way at the grassroots level, so they don't have to do the paperwork. So there should be a proper awareness in the government level as well as a stakeholders, like the like-minded NGOs and other like the government officials. There should be a proper connectivity. I feel without proper connectivity and proper networking, it is very difficult even to have a basic break in the chain, and we cannot just depend on the government, because every one of us is liable in a certain way to stop the trafficking. So I feel that to have a dent in the trafficking system, we should have a proper system like from awareness, advocacy, rescue, rehabilitation, and that's the proper circle, and eventually we will be able to stop it. So that is a total circle we all have to follow.
Yep.
Thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, that is all the questions that those are all the questions we have time for at the moment. If you have questions, please feel free to let us know and we'll communicate them to the speaker so that they can get back to you about that. Thank you very much to all of our speakers, all of our attendees, and all of our hosts. I can pass the convo back to Ria now.
Thank you so much for answering all of those questions. Before we conclude, I will take this opportunity to talk about the statements and declarations written or contributed to by us at the IBVM UN NGO. The link to these will be posted in the chat. These include the Civil Society Declaration, IBVM's written statement, and IBVM's oral statement, which focus greatly on economies based on welfare and care. They also focus on making livelihood sustainable so as to facilitate a green transition to economies that are based on decent work for all. Now, I request Sister Cynthia to conclude today's event.
Thank you, Ria. Hi, everyone. I am Cynthia along with Janet, representing our NGO at the UN. On behalf of our team, it's my privilege to express our gratitude to every one of you. Thank you, Your Excellency Michelle, for accepting our invitation and delivering the keynote address today. Your passion and commitment to campaign against human trafficking is commendable. We appreciate your availability. Thank you. Dear Sister Imelda, you are an inspiration for all of us. Yes, words are not enough to express our gratitude to appreciate your work, the noble work that you are doing. Thank you for sharing with us with conviction your knowledge, experience, and the work that you are doing. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you, Nabinita, our young and enthusiastic advocate working to end human trafficking. Appreciate the great work that you are doing and being with us today to share your work and experience. Thank you. And of course, thank you, Ria, our vibrant youth intern, for moderating the session so efficiently today. And thanks to Sarah and Cindy for your technical help. You're always very helpful whenever we approached you. Thank you so much. It is the teamwork that made this event possible. Thank you to every one of you. And dear participants, thank you for joining us. I'm sure all of us have benefited much from this session. Thanks to all of you. Thank you.